This train, which travels between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, carries freight and mail sacks, businessmen and housewives, children on school outings. This is Israel, 18 years after independence, 18 years as a member of the United Nations, 10 years after the Sinai War of 1956. This is Israel, Tinderbox of the Middle East. In 1949, the fighting between Israel and 7 Arab states was ended by a series of armistice agreements arranged by the United Nations as a temporary measure. About 500,000 Arab refugees were left in camps near the borders of Israel. Israel refuses to discuss their repatriation except as part of an overall peace settlement. The Arabs refuse to discuss peace until Israel takes back the refugees. This is Gaza, a city in a narrow strip of Egyptian-ruled territory which huddles between Israel and the Sinai Desert. Here is one of the largest Arab refugee camps. The people who live here are supported by doles from the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. They have not been allowed to integrate into the Arab society in which they live. Here, 10 years ago, the Egyptian government fanned the bitterness which the refugees felt towards Israel into the flames of hate. They organized, trained and equipped groups of saboteurs. They called themselves Fedayun, the self-sacrificers. Their mission, for which they were paid, was to cross into Israel and to terrorize the civilian population. Isolated farming settlements, mined roads, cut irrigation lines, and murdered indiscriminately from ambush. Some were caught by the Israeli border patrols. Their arms and equipment followed a consistent pattern: submachine guns, the rubber-soled footwear of a night sneak, grenades, plastic mines, and Egyptian ammunition. The Egyptian radio and press openly boasted of their exploits. In 1956, the Israelis, concerned over the build-up of Russian arms by the Egyptians, who vowed they would soon exterminate Israel, crossed the border into the Sinai Peninsula. Their aims were to destroy the Egyptian military concentrations, force open the passage through the international waterway leading to the Gulf of Aqaba, and to stop the raids by the Fedayun. Within 100 hours, these objectives were attained by the Israeli forces, led by the then Chief of Staff, General Moshe Dayan. The capture of Gaza wiped out the nests of the Fedayun. Although Israel withdrew from Sinai and Gaza, for the past 10 years no Fedayun have operated against Israeli territory. The Israelis feel that this is a vindication of their contention that Arab governments can control the refugees if they wish to do so. Now, 10 years after the Sinai War, the focus of Arab-Israel conflict has shifted north, to the Syrian border in the Galilee region. Border troubles are not new to the Galilee. This is the Tell of Hazor, which the Bible says was destroyed by Joshua when it threatened the security of the Israelite tribes. The excavations of Hazor were directed by Professor Yigal Yadin, a former commander-in-chief of the Israeli army. The dried bones and burnt remains are mute evidence of a city destroyed and rebuilt 9 times, representing the insecurity of the region through the ages. This monument commemorates the defense of the Galilee settlements against Syrian attacks over the past 50 years. and is a symbol of valor to young Israelis. In 1948, after the United Nations voted to establish the Jewish state, Syrian armies crossed into the Galilee with armor and artillery, destroying houses and penetrating deep into the heart of the Jordan Valley before they were driven back, leaving behind their destroyed armored cars and tanks. Israel has had to pay a heavy price for the defense of the Galilee over the years, as may be seen in the carefully tended markers in the military cemeteries in the area. One of the sources of the troubles in the Galilee is the fact that almost all of Israel's water resources are located along the Syrian frontier, the Sea of Galilee and the River Jordan. The Jordan River, which feeds the Sea of Galilee, is itself fed by several smaller streams, some of which flow through Syrian territory. With the help of international experts, Israel drew up a plan to divert water from the Sea of Galilee to the arid south of their country. The Israeli scheme followed the project for the general exploitation of the water resources of the region, which had been drawn up by President Eisenhower's special assistant, Mr. Eric Johnson. This plan had been accepted by the Arab water experts, but was rejected on political grounds by their governments. When Israel began to implement the plan, Syria threatened to go to war. Undeterred by the Syrian threat, Israel constructed a network of pipelines, tunnels and open channel ducts over difficult terrain into the heart of the desert. Giant concrete pipes 9 feet in diameter were specially made for this project, which Israel claims is essential for her future development. When Arab threats to wage war over the water failed to stop the execution of the Israeli plan, Syria, in conjunction with the other Arab states, drew up plans to divert the sources of the Jordan River. Heavy equipment was brought here to the Syrian border. Israel stated flatly that any tampering with her water supply would be regarded as an act of aggression. Another point of conflict has been the Sea of Galilee itself. Here, on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, near Tabgha, where the miracle of the fishes and the loaves took place, are the ruins of Capernaum. These are the remains of a synagogue where, the Gospel relates, Jesus came to pray and to contend with the elders. The Mount of Beatitudes, where Jesus preached the Sermon of the Mount, overlooks the waters where Peter plied his trade as a Jewish fisherman. Today, as they did 2 millennia ago, Jewish fishermen still reap harvests of fish from the Galilee. They use sonar devices and nylon nets, but, as in ancient times, the livelihood of the villagers in this area depends on the freshwater fish they bring to market from the lake. According to the terms of the Israeli-Syrian armistice agreement, the sea is entirely within the boundaries of Israel. But from time to time, Syrian emplacements on the northeastern shore fire on the fishing boats, damaging nets and causing casualties. Israel, to stop this harassment, launched raids across the border into Syria. soldiers taken in the raids are held in Israeli prisons until they are exchanged under United Nations supervision for Israeli civilians who are held by the Syrians. These men, exchanged in 1964, had undergone mistreatment at the hands of the Syrians so brutal that most of them are still in mental sanatoriums. In September of 1966, the Middle East teetered on the brink of war. An Israeli patrol boat had run aground on a reef near the northeast shore of the Sea of Galilee. While attempts were made to free the vessel, the Syrians opened fire from their shore positions, and a few seconds later, Syrian MiG fighters joined the attack. Two of the MiGs were downed by Israel. Wreckage of one of the MiGs was dredged up out of the sea. While the Israeli sailors who had been wounded in the attack were evacuated to hospital, Israel delivered an ultimatum to the Syrians. It was only then that the United Nations Truce Organization persuaded the Syrians not to interfere with the salvage of the boat, and an armed conflict was averted. The floating of the boat took 6 days and 6 nights. From a strategic point of view, the Israeli villages along the Syrian border are at a distinct disadvantage. They lie in the lowlands, completely dominated by the Syrian positions on the mountains that tower high above them. The settlers have learned to live with the almost daily shooting and shelling from these Syrian positions. Even livestock in the fields are sheltered behind metal walls. As it happens, many of Israel's government leaders live in the villages along the Syrian border. Yigal Allon, Minister of Labor and a former army commander who still helps set Israel defense policies, can look across to Syrian fortifications from his front doorstep. General Moshe Dayan, the former army chief of staff, was born in the Galilee. Kadish Luz, the Speaker of the Parliament, and Shimon Peres, former Deputy Minister of Defense, both call the Galilee their home. So too does Levi Eshkol, Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel. Because of Syrian gunfire, ploughing in fields that run near the border is done in armor-plated tractors, with watchful armed guards close on hand. The Syrians also work their lands right down to the border line. When the Israelis see the Syrian shepherds remove their flocks, they know they can expect trouble in the area. Syrian guns, which Israel claims are illegal according to the armistice agreement, have several times opened fire on villages along the border, destroying buildings and livestock and causing casualties among the farmers. Villagers living on the Israeli side of the border have also come under attack by Syrian guns. In this village, 2 women and a child were killed by Syrian bombardment. This particular attack brought immediate reprisal by Israel. Unable to silence the Syrian artillery by any other means, Israeli jets destroyed the emplacements and, according to the Syrians, equipment which had been working on the diversion of the Jordan River sources. Only the wild antelopes of the region can move freely here. Out of the domestic political turmoil which has plagued Syria in recent months has been born a new terrorist group called El-Fatah, the Conquest. Reminiscent of the Egyptian Fedayeen of 10 years ago, the El-Fatah are recruited from the Arab refugee camps in Syria. According to the Syrians, they receive some of their training and equipment from communist China. The El-Fatah are paid for each incursion carried out in Israeli territory. Their objective is to sow a reign of terror among Israel's civilian population by mining roads, cutting water lines, and blowing up houses. After each incident, teams of United Nations and Israeli trackers trace their trails up to the border, but the Arab authorities refuse to allow the trackers to cross the border. Once in a while, Israeli ambushes intercept the El-Fatah. Some resist capture, stand and fight, or run away. Those that are captured are brought to trial and sentenced to long prison terms. None of these infiltrators has ever been executed, despite the death and destruction they have caused in Israel. In the October of 1966, an Israeli border patrol jeep struck a mine. The explosion pulverized the vehicle, scattering debris over the area. 4 policemen riding in the jeep were killed. This incident climaxed a series of similar attacks in the area and brought public feeling to the boiling point. As in the past, United Nations investigators traced the trail of the mine layers to the nearby border. The trail led directly to the Syrian army stronghold of Tel Azazyat. Tel Azazyat, Israel says, is one of the major centers of mine-laying and El-Fatah raids. As the nation mourned the loss of the 4 young men, Israel turned to the Security Council of the United Nations with a complaint against Syria. While Syrian government leaders in Damascus openly praised El-Fatah raids, Syrian representatives at the United Nations disclaimed any responsibility. The Israeli Minister for Foreign Affairs, Abba Eban, flew to New York to deliver an address in which he listed 70 attacks by El-Fatah during the past year. While discussions went on, the Council requested a report on the situation by General Od Bull, commander of the Truce Supervision Organization in Israel. As the United Nations sat in New York, El-Fatah raiders struck again. On the eve of the Sabbath, explosive charges were set off under an apartment building in a residential section of Jerusalem. Prime Minister Eshkol interrupted his Sabbath rest to hasten to the scene. By a miracle, no one was badly injured. days later, another attack took place, this time on the railway line connecting Jerusalem with the cities of the plain. The line runs close to the Jordan-Israel frontier and is easy prey for saboteurs. The train was fired on after the charge exploded. Again, by miracle, no one was injured. But because of the difficult terrain, rail traffic in and out of Israel's capital city was interrupted for 3 days until the line could be cleared and repaired. The training camps of El Fatah are near Damascus. However, the raiders crossed through other Arab countries to reach all parts of Israel. Israel has declared that she holds both Syria and the countries crossed by El Fatah responsible for the raids. Israel has retaliated by sending forces across the borders to punish villages which are centers for the terrorist operations. In November of 1966, Israel attacked a Jordan village where 40 houses were demolished in an eye-for-eye operation. The United Nations has condemned Israel for such raids. Now, 10 years later, Israel finds herself in the same position as she was before launching the Sinai War of 1956. As tension mounted under the Syrian raids, Israel's parliament met to hear a report from Foreign Minister Iban on a United Nations resolution inviting Syria to stop El Fatah attacks. The resolution, introduced by America, proved by a majority of the Security Council, but was vetoed by the Soviet Union. At the same time, Syrian Prime Minister Zion flew to Cairo to conclude a military treaty with Egypt aimed at involving the Egyptians in direct military action against Israel. Israel claims that the problem of the Arab refugees could be solved in the same way that Israel solved her own refugee problem. More than 1 million refugees, including 500,000 from Arab countries, were moved out of camps into homes in farming areas and in urban centers. The Arabs say, on the other hand, that Israel must allow the Arab refugees to return without any prior conditions. These children may be future recruits for terrorist gangs. As long as the Arab refugees remain in the camps, the Middle East will continue to be a volcano, a tinderbox threatening the peace of the world. In 1955, Russia succeeded in penetrating the Middle East with a supply of Czechoslovakian arms to Egypt. Since then, in the contest between East and West, each side has poured arms into this area of the world. The latest armaments, including jet aircraft and missiles, have now been acquired by Israel and the Arabs. Observers believe that both Israel and Egypt now have atomic bomb capability, and Soviet missiles in Egypt and Syria have leapfrogged the NATO and other Western defense pads. An East-West confrontation is rapidly building up in the Middle East, as in Berlin, Korea, and Vietnam. Israel believes that the quickest way to resolve this dangerous situation would be for Israel and the Arab nations to come together to discuss peace. If this could happen, Israel says, all other problems of water, refugees, and sabotage would automatically find their solutions. This is the challenge facing Arab and Israeli, East and West. Here on the Sea of Galilee, on the slopes of the Mount of Beatitudes, whence emanated the ideals of peace on earth and the brotherhood of man, just here lies the challenge of destructive war that might engulf the entire world, or of a productive life of peace for the Middle East.